Good afternoon, good evening, baseball fans. Welcome back to the Barstool Baseball Show. This is Carrol. I am joined by Chris Klemmer. It is Wednesday. It is a National League Wednesday show. I like that jersey. Is that a vintage? What is it? Is that a Tom Seaver? Who is that?
And the cool thing is, it's the same material. It's 1969. You can see by the patch, 100th anniversary. But the cool thing is the same material they used to use back then, which is awesome, but I can't wear it when it's really hot. It gets itchy. I don't know how guys played in this. This is not conducive to baseball at all. It looks sharp, but like in July or August, I don't wear this. It gets too itchy.
I think the environment back then lent itself to tougher skin. Like I think guys just had coarser bodies. So maybe the wool wasn't as, and don't take this the wrong way. I just see you as, I feel like your skin is like buffalo built, like soft, moisturized. Nice.
I don't use moisturizer, but I am I'm a sensitive man. The 2023 sensitive, man. You're probably right. I'm sure, and I'm also, I'm sure that Cleon Jones and Tom Seaver and Tommy Agee were not complaining about it being itchy. Those guys were real men. I am not.
Are you a moist guy? Do you get moist? Or are you like?
No, I don't really sweat ever. I'm obsessed with BO. Like I'm terrified of it. Like luckily I'm pretty skinny. I don't sweat a lot, but the idea of BO horrifies me. So I put on deodorant multiple times a day typically. And like when I do it in the morning, I'll put on like 8 rolls. Like I go crazy with it. I am very anti-BO. BO is so gross.
Okay, we have a big baseball show to get to today. I do need to know though, like if you get a whiff, good whiff, solid full-bodied whiff of enclosed environment, we'll say subway. No, we're in an elevator. We're at a skybox at a Mets game. We're going up to Citi Field and you catch a big whiff. Does that set you back? Where does your negativity towards BO or your protective state against BO come from?
Yeah, I mean, if it's me, I'm horrified. Luckily, it's not me. I'm very rarely because I'm crazy with it. But like, I'm in New York City. Like, I smelt it on the subway today, and it's just like, oh. So I got up and I changed my seat. I was sitting down, but I got up. I'm like, you know what? I don't need to sit down. A and B. I'm just gonna stand up on the other side of the subway because it's so gross. I can't deal with it.
Yep.
I move away.
All right. Subscribe to our YouTube page, please, so you can get a load of this jersey Klemmer's talking about. Can you stand up one more time, give the viewers a look? This is classic. And I don't even like 69 Mets. If you guys remember, the Cubs blew an 8-game lead mid-September.
They certainly did.
Yeah, go fuck yourself. That was tough, dude. I believe that was 1969 also one of the very few years a team started the entire infield for the All-Star game. I think they had Becker, Banks,
right.
Sano, Williams.
It is kind of sad, the 69 Cubs, because, think about it, that was like Ernie Banks, kind of like last hurrah. Billy Williams, Ron Santos, some of those guys their best days were behind them, but that was like kind of their last chance to get in the playoffs, and it just didn't happen.
But it's a nice jersey. If you guys are watching on YouTube, subscribe. Okay, loaded show. If you guys know what we do on Wednesdays, we jump around the league. This one's going to be a little different. We prepared 3 substantive conversations about 3 different teams in each division. Very excited about that. Diamondbacks, Reds, Marlins. Some announcements beforehand, though. We talked about the Subway. You are going to the Subway Series tonight, which I guess game results don't really matter because by the time people hear this, it'll have been decided. I guess I'm just more excited about or interested in like the practical experience of leaving the Barstool office with who are you going with and
Marty.
How long does it take and what do you do?
Yeah, I think I usually take the 7 line when I go in. So it's the Subway, kind of brings you right there. But the guys were saying, we're talking with Glenny Balls yesterday about this, and he says, you guys should take the Long Island Railroad. So we're going to do that. We're going to leave from Penn Station, jump on the Long Island Railroad. Maybe we'll have an adult beverage beforehand at a bar across the street from the office, and then we'll head to the game. And Marty's already mad. I score, so I like to keep score. I know you do, Carl. You keep a beautiful scorebook. I've seen your scorebook. It's gorgeous. Marty doesn't like scoring. Marty has trouble, I think, reading and a number of things. Speaking, as we know, and I think he finds the scorebook to be upsetting. I think it might I think anything intellectual might upset Marty Mush. So this could be a struggle there. He's going to have to wrap his head around me scoring the game and enjoying the game.
It's a threat.
It is a threat. Yeah. He wants to sit there and just drool and, mouth agape, just stare at the game where I'm like, Carl, we're monitoring the game. We're keeping track. We're seeing who's doing what. It's important if a guy walked 3 times in that game or how his pitcher's doing. You can also kind of see the trend maybe the first 9 batters, he got out. But now the second time around the order, you're seeing harder hit balls. So that stuff like that's important. Marty Mush doesn't value that.
Yeah, you know what? Watching baseball on TV has really made it easy for people. So when you go to a game, you just get lost in the sauce.
Right.
Keeping track. Oh, I love a good scorecard. And there's a problem with the pitch clock and I know it's easy to just say like, well, I don't have as much time to keep score. But the problem before is I like to alternate. I like to have different colored pens.
Yeah.
I like to take my time. I like to tally up as the batters come in. So it's definitely mess with that. Speaking of,
you're more
score,
of an artist. Yeah. Your book is more of an artist than mine. Mine is very much like, all right, F9, and I just do it. I try to keep it neat because my handwriting is pretty bad. But other than that, but your book, your scorecard is like Da Vinci. It's gorgeous, beautiful.
You're like a geriatric oncologist assistant keeping notes in like a outpatient clinic built into a mini mall, just rifling through the farm, just one after the other. I do have. I think if it's not calligraphy, I just have an appreciation for the finished product. I take my time. That's not because I've got great handwriting. It's more of like I'm willing to go slow and make sure those lines are straight. Speaking of straight lines, I'm going to Nebraska. You want to talk about a straight line? That part of the country, everything is just a box. We are driving to Nebraska tomorrow, me and Castellani. There's a couple mystery guests within the Barstool family that'll be out there. You know how much I love college baseball. Love to talk about. Played at the University of Illinois. Love Big Ten baseball. Love college baseball north of the Mason-Dixon line generally. And this will be my third year, and it's probably the coolest thing I get to do with Barstool. So very pumped to get out there. We leave tomorrow morning, and we're going to do some programming around it. I'm going to try and do a special edition college baseball podcast this weekend, but we'll have a daily vlog, man on the street, interviews.
So you're driving from Chicago to Omaha. Like how? Correct. I have no bearing of that. How long does that take?
Seven.
Okay.
That's one gas stop at Davenport, Iowa. That's fine. That's fine. That's leaving at 6:30 in the morning, grabbing Chris, checking the hotel at 3:30, stopping somewhere for a nice lunch. I draw my line usually closer like 9.5, 10, I think, in a day. Other thing, if you fly, you got to rent a car. And then I don't know. There's just a lot going on there. I said Diamondbacks, Reds, Marlins, but I also want to do a little housekeeping. Housekeeping is a segment where we talk about our own teams and housekeeping. I love housekeeping. I want to do some housekeeping with you. Frank the Tank was at Pete Alonso's charity event last night. You saw the clip.
Yeah, I talked to him just this morning. He was I think he's happy how it went. He made a good point. He's like, I guess he was initially promised doing like a stand-up set. And when he got there, that got limited. And there's one moment in the video, you can see he tries to grab the microphone from Craig Carton. Craig Carton's a guy he's probably one of the bigger names in sports talk radio in New York City. He tries to grab the microphone and Carton kind of grabs it back. But I think Frank got some good shots in. By the end, the most interesting to me, though, is when Frank was leaving, he runs into Steve Cohen. And they have an interaction. And Frank was saying, these guys are frustrating me. And Cohen's like, hey, they're frustrating me too. And but I guess Frank was saying Cohen couldn't get away from him fast enough. But he was definitely aware of who he was. Like, I think Cohen even said to him, like, you got to stop picking on the guys. Cohen immediately recognized Frank, which is wild that one of the richest men in the whole world knows who Frank the Tank is.
Frank is his most popular fan, though, right?
Absolutely. Frank might be the most recognizable sports fan in America. Any sport. He's more recognizable than Fireman Ed. He's more recognizable than Steve Bartman.
We're eliminating. You had to say him. We're eliminating fucking Jagoff. Are we taking out celebrities? Like Spike Lee doesn't count. Jack Nicholson doesn't count.
Right.
Is Frank bigger than Portnoy?
No.
Well, there you go. But Dave's a celebrity. Is Big Cat okay? Is Big Cat to the line?
I mean, Big Cat's one of the biggest names in sports.
If you walked around a game with Big Cat or walked around a game with Frank the Tank, and then you had someone count the pictures, that would be interesting. Throw Big Cat in Wrigley, throw Frank in Citi Field, count the pictures for an hour.
Frank is Nick Tarini we were on the road trip were doing that Monkey Boy documentary, and he said, "What if you took a picture of the New Hampshire outline, just a map of New Hampshire, and had Frank's face? Who's more recognizable, New Hampshire or Frank?" And I think Frank might win.
You think?
Yeah, I think
I'll guarantee you Frank might win.
So Frank's more famous
Frank
than
up against this. I'm putting Frank up against Oklahoma, which is a uniquely shaped state.
Yeah.
I'll put Frank up against. I'll put
Maybe
Frank
not
easily up against Virginia and Kentucky. Yeah. I'll even say Ohio. I'll say Ohio. I think people overestimate how smart their neighbor is. Your neighbor's a moron. The people around you are so utterly stupid. New Hampshire's a challenging one. That is.
I'm from there, so for me, it's very it's hard for me to kind of like wrap my head around that one. But like other ones, no, you're absolutely right. Other than like Texas, California, New York, maybe Florida. Other than those, Frank's probably more famous than the other states. Frank is like I always say it, man. I walk around Citi Field with him. Even we go to other, not baseball. We could just walk around. It is like being with the Beatles. You get swarmed. Part of it is he moves very slow. Part of it is it's Frank, so he looks like Frank. But I'll say this though, the man never says no. I've seen that man take thousands of pictures just in the few games I've gone with him, and he never says no. Man of the people, Frank Tank.
God bless Frank Fleming, and we should probably schedule a maiden appearance with him.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
That's been on because then people DM them like, "Hey, where the fuck's Frank? How come you don't talk to Frank?" We have it. There's when the timing's right.
We'll get Frank on these National League shows soon. Absolutely.
I feel like the Mets need to win 6 of 7, 7 of 8. We bring him in here
in a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
This series is big. It's just 2 games against the Yankees. We got our 2 best guys in the Hill. Got Scherzer. People have already heard this, and then Verlander the next day. But the Yankees are going with Severino and Cole. So, the Mets season is at a point where every game matters because, otherwise we're going to dig a hole we can't get out of. We're only 3 back of the wild card, but there's 4 teams we got to leapfrog over. Like, at this point, the Mets have played so badly that every game matters. And this series is important.
And it can go both ends of the spectrum. You guys win both of them, and Scherzer and Verlander pitch well. You guys pull out the schedule. When do they pitch next? Who we got? Start mapping it out, just like you did when we looked at that slice at the end of April, and you were talking about the Nationals. I think you said they should go 14-4. I think they went 4-14.
I think I said, yeah, they did very bad. And I don't know, it was close to that. But by the way, the Nationals, got a lot of heat. Oh, the Nationals, they're good. They're on pace to lose about 100 games, just like I said. So.
Yeah, I mean, just because they had a little burst and I had a nice moment of positivity, that doesn't sit well with you. I know that.
Nope.
I know that. Because their owner sucks and fuck them and everybody should have $300 million payrolls.
I mean, sorry. I mean, some teams are bad. The Mets right now are bad. I mean, they're not as bad as the Nationals.
What about the natural cycle of success in the sport? They won a World Series. Their guys got older. They tried with Patrick Corbin. They spent money. Would you have kept Rendon? I wouldn't have.
I probably would have. Honestly, I probably would have. I would have been wrong there, but I probably would have. There wasn't a lot there that told us that Rendon was going to fall apart like he has. I mean, the poor Angels. This happens every time. Every time they sign someone big, other than Trout, obviously, but everybody else, it's Pujols, obviously the most clear example, but Josh Hamilton, C.J. Wilson wasn't terrible for them, but even the 1-year rentals, Matt Harvey was a disaster. Just go down the line. The poor Angels, they always get stuck holding it's like musical chairs. They lose every single time. So,
thank you for bringing up C.J. Wilson. It's not that he wasn't terrible for him because he did make an all-star game with them. It was just a matter that they gave him as much money as they did and that he was a huge signing. It was like, now we got C.J. Wilson. If they saw him for who he was, this is what we do. This is what you and I do. This is why I put it together an outline today because I knew we could just sit here and go all over the place. But there were 3 teams today I really want to focus on. Yep. And part of this is A, it's a good exercise for us to educate ourselves, but B, as a casual National Baseball fan, like people are going to clearly miss what's going on with the Diamondbacks week to week. You're going to look up, you're going to see they're 41-25 and be like, wait, what is going on? So hopefully we can spend some time and clear that up so people feel good when they see the Diamondbacks, you hear about the Diamondbacks. The Reds are super exciting right now because they've brought up a number of young players that have won over the fan base. Cincinnati is a historic baseball town. The NL Central is extremely weak. These guys are awesome to watch. And so we're starting to wonder if maybe they can win the National League Central. We're going to dig into that. And then finally, the Marlins. I put together a list of questions because you watch a lot of Marlins. Being a Mets fan, watch much more than I do. And I know that you're close to it, I should say closer than I am. So I did some research, put together some questions that I think like, if I just as like a regular Joe sports fan, like what would you want to know about the Marlins as they're getting better and starting to make some noise in the National League East? So let's start with the earliest time or the West time zone. Let's go out West. I like being West. And let's start with the Arizona Diamondbacks. At the time of recording, they're 41-25, and they've got the best record in the National League. Last night, they had a first game of a series against the Phillies who are also red hot. There was crazy drama. Torey Lovullo got kicked out after Corbin Carrol got drilled for a second time. Corbin Carroll is 2 for 3, 2 runs. Diamondbacks win 9-8, blah, blah, blah. JT Real Muto hits for the site. There's so much to unpack from that game if we want to spend time on that game. I think we should up front and then kind of because there's some themes that come out of that game. So, long-winded Diamondbacks intro here, Klemmer. Long-winded, but at this point, do you believe that they are as good as they are, or are you more in line with their Pythagorean win theorem that suggests that they should be like 36-31?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I'm not going to come out and say their winning percentage right now is what, like 630, 621. So that's on pace for what, like 102, 103 win season? That's not going to probably happen. But that's just how the world works. It's hard to win 101 games. But are they a team that could win 90 games that is a playoff team? I think they are. This team is really good. And that's not a slam at all. That's a compliment. I mean, especially when you consider where the Diamondbacks franchise has been the last few years. Now, you know me. I look at a team and I don't look necessarily – my first instinct isn't why are they so good. My first instinct is what's wrong with them. It's just kind of how I just look at it. And I'm going to go way back here, but they have – and the starting pitching really concerns me long term with them. Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly are very good, but I have like Boston Braves vibes right now, like Spawn Insane and Pray for Rain. You have two good starting pitchers. You could even say two great starting pitchers. Merrill Kelly's been great this year, and Zach Gallen is incredibly talented. But after that, I worry, and this is a trend within base. You know, we've been talking on the ranking show about all these teams that have pitching depth issues. It's across Major League Baseball. The difference with the Diamondbacks, though, is that none of their pitchers are horrible. So, you know, Ryan Nelson, Tommy Henry, Zach Davies, they're not good. And they're even below average. But they're not going to lose you games. We look at some of these other teams, like Michael Grove and the Dodgers, like he goes out there, you lose that game. The Mets with David Peterson, he goes out there, they got 8 fucking ERA. You're going to lose no matter what. But the guys that Diamondbacks have out there are good enough to keep you competitive. And then that lineup, now remember, the Diamondbacks are 9th in ERA in the National League. Their batting average is first. Their on-base percentage is third. Their slugging percentage is third. So if you could just give me 3 earned runs over 5 innings, the Diamondbacks are going to be competitive.
Yeah, it's a really interesting pitching staff. And I love that you brought up Spawn Insane, Pray for Rain. Was that Boston Braves, early 40s?
48, 49, that area. I mean, you know, they went to the World Series in 48, right? 47, they lost the Indians.
I have a professional obligation right now to encourage our audience to Wikipedia Johnny Sane. He basically pioneered the concept of being a pitching coach. He like invented how to teach people how to throw curveballs. Because before it was like, oh, I played with this guy. He has a curveball. We would stand in the bullpen together in the outfield for decades in baseball. How'd you learn how to throw that pitch? I've always thrown that pitch. But he was like, There should be a position on the bench. We work with players. We teach them these things. We standardize it, institutionalize it. He like invented the contraption where the ball spun on it so he could show it. And I think they still use it to that day. God
Really,
bless
I
that
didn't know
man.
that. Yeah, I knew he was a great pitching coach. Like you said, one of the first great pitching coaches in Major League Baseball. But he was a very good pitcher in his own right. And him and Warren Spahn were, those Boston Braves teams and early Milwaukee Braves teams were offense first. So to have two great starting pitchers made the difference for them. But they had nothing else beyond that. But the Diamondbacks don't have bad pitchers, though, after that. At least they're mediocre.
And here I am thinking that the Diamondbacks, I thought that they led Major League Baseball in strikeouts. They do not, the pitching staff. The pitching staff is, in all respects, below average.
Yeah, their bullpen's okay. It's not bad. None of their guys are great. You're not going to have like the Orioles where you have those two guys that are like, holy shit, they come out, the game's over. But their guys are okay. That's the thing is I actually kind of like how this team is constructed because like there's no giant weakness. There's no giant hole like you see with some other teams. Everyone is okay, and that could be good enough with that offense. And Corbin Carrol, I know I talk about him every week, but it doesn't get old. He's that good. And then I know you want to talk about the trade with the Blue Jays, and I think people sleep on this because Corbin Carrol is so great. That trade changed the Diamondbacks.
Oh, dude, the depth chart implications from that trade are utterly magnificent. I'm going through the bullpen now, and I had one big point about that is Andrew Chafin as a closer has to be improved upon. I think he's a great left-handed late guy, but if he's out there getting saves for you now or even in a remote situation to be like closer by platoon, that's going to come back to bite you down the road. Now, I do like Andrew Chafin too because he brings character and personality to a clubhouse, which is very important. He started his career with Arizona, played with the Cubs for a little bit, Oakland, Detroit, back in Arizona. That's the one reliever I want to call him. So how do you fix that is you have two routes. Okay. So obviously the trade deadline, which I want to talk about, but then internal. The problem the Diamondbacks have internally is they had a couple of like bigger prospect names in AAA that have been absolutely terrible. One that made a debut last year, I'm going to say his name wrong because it's spelled bizarrely, but Brandon Fate, P-F-A-A-D-T, Brandon Fate has been bad in the big leagues. He's been bad in AAA.
Yes.
And then just a couple other guys if you go down and look at the Reno Aces, and I know they're playing in Nevada, but there's no help available internally that seems to be immediate. It seems like those guys are already up there, and Tommy Henry and Ryan Nelson. And then externally, you go to the trade deadline, and I'm going to go on a trade deadline tangent here. I don't want to yet. I want to stay on this Diamondbacks pitching staff because the trade deadline is going to be a disaster for so many people.
I just don't think there are enough teams that are selling.
No. And so many people are going to want to buy. Reds are going to want to buy. Cardinals are going to want. Every single Padres are going to want to buy. Mariners are going to want to buy. Teams we don't even talk about in the power ranking are going to want to buy. Mets got to buy. Yankees have to buy. Should the Rays buy? Orioles must buy. Everyone is buying.
It would behoove a team, like you're mentioning, the Mariners, someone like that. Someone should sell. Someone who is probably should be a buyer, or you think would be a buyer, should become a seller because you're going to get so much back if you're willing to. Now, it sucks to those fans. Hey, we're 4 games out of the wild card or whatever in July, or 5 games out of the wild card. But man, oh man, you could get a whole bunch back because there's so few teams selling, and some of the teams that are selling don't have anything to offer. The A's aren't like the Royals are. There's not much there to sell. So if you're willing to sell, you could get a lot back. It's just tough to punt a year, though.
The peril of the modern trade deadline and the wild card and the perceptions fans have is we should get to the wild card. The Phillies aren't doing anybody help winning 84 games last year and going to the World Series. It doesn't because it just could now push more front offices or owners that aren't typically influential at these decisions to come down into that office on a Monday morning or Thursday afternoon and say, hey, no, I want to buy big. Get rid of those AA players. I don't give a shit about those minor leaguers. And that's just bad planning. That's bad business. And it's only going to create more top heavy and more like gaps in baseball. We're going to have shittier teams and better teams.
Everything changed with the wild card. I don't know how far back you can remember, Carl, but early 90s, there was no wild card. You had 4 divisions, and let's say the A's in 1990, they won 100 games. If you're in the National League, American League West, you're out of it by July 4th. It's over. And so you had 6 teams that were willing to sell. So you didn't usually get this crazy nowadays because the wild card and there are so many teams in contention. You get so much more back for those rented players. Back when I was a kid, you would maybe do a rented player for 1 prospect. It was a 1-for-1. Now it's a rented player for 4 prospects. The wild card changed everything which is good because more teams are in it, but it's bad if you're trying to get a player. If you're the Diamondbacks, you're trying to get a couple of relievers. It's going to be hard. Trying to get a good closer, I don't even know where you turn. I mean, maybe Chapman, but then you got to worry about your clubhouse with a young team. And then not only that, but you also got to get a couple starting pitchers, and they have some holes in the lineup too. So it's tough for those good teams.
Closers need opportunities. You need to find closers. And when you have mediocre teams and teams knocking on the door for wild card contention, it's just hard to develop closers. It is. You have to. That's why the Orioles have been so good at it, because the games have been so low stakes. They're just bringing guys up and down until somebody gets settled in, comfortable, locked in, loves the role, has the feel. Boom, you're a closer. It's really all it is. These guys are just as talented as each other. It's just the matter of executing on the mound, feeling comfortable. And it can be the matter of just that makes a 1% difference in, release point, timing, arm speed, whatever it is that allows the pitches to be executed at a major league level. It's
a great point, Carl. Another example is the Astros with Rafael Montero, right? So he was with the Mets. They tried him as a starter, they tried him as a reliever, everything failed. And he went to the Astros, and he had a little more time, was able to figure that stuff out. So you do have those guys that can land on a team. You're right. You put them in the right, give him the pitching coach, go back to Johnny Sane a little bit, get him the right pitching coach, get him in those low leverage situations. The talent's there, you can harness it. And that's a great, that's another reason why tanking like the Orioles did can be a benefit, because you can kind of find out what you have by putting these guys in some different spots. Where the Yankees, for instance, are always competitive, it's harder to kind of fill those in because every game matters for them.
So one suggestion for the Diamondbacks then would be as they progress through the season and they continue at this pace. Now, I'm not saying they win 105 games, but they certainly can win the division, which is something at the start of the season very few people would have suggested. So as they get into July, and they look down to Reno, and if you see Brandon Fate,
maybe,
I don't know, Blake Walton, who's this guy, Slade Ciccone, just a number of these very, very bad statistics as starting pitchers, and there is a hesitancy as an organization to convert guys to the bullpen. You bring them up as starters, you want to use them in the big leagues as starters, but. They could get a point. They look at a couple of these guys and they're like, hey, we need you for 2 innings a pop or 1 inning here. And so maybe could be some unique competitive advantage if you can convert top prospects into late, bullpen guys that are effective against 3 or more hitters now. There's a fucking spin zone for you.
It's tough. They kind of got fucked by Madison Bumgarner. So, we forget he was on this team, but he was someone they were hoping, they didn't expect him to be a Cy Young winner. But they were hoping he could go out there and have a 4.5 ERA and maybe keep a guy like Tommy Henry or Ryan Nelson either down in the minors a little bit longer or use them as a trade chip. But now they've had to use those guys in the starting rotation, and they need those guys now. So the Bumgarner complete collapse, I think, kind of set them back a little bit with some of the pieces they might have been able to trade with that they're not able to do anymore.
Credit to him for DFAing Madison Bumgarner, though, because he's a terrifying guy with tremendous modern history. They could have let him go out for 10 starts. They let him go out for 4 starts, and we're like, that's it. Nope, we're not doing this. We want to compete this year. So,
yeah, and obviously the signing, looking back on it, is pretty horrible. It probably didn't make a lot of sense even at the time. I remember thinking it was kind of a foolish signing by them, but regardless, they at least made an effort. Hopefully, with that being, I think that's off the books this year, right? So hopefully they can use those resources next year and keep building up this really strong team with a very interesting foundation.
So 41-25 at time of recording. They're 12-2 over their last 14 after they dropped the series against San Diego. Or maybe it was the Braves. Don't hold me to that. I have a couple other notes I want to talk about him. The first one is Torey Lovullo, quickly, manager. So if you don't know Torey Lovullo, um, he's been around, but he's a John Daniels guy at the Blue Jays. So if you don't remember John Daniels with the Blue Jays or Red Sox.
Yeah, wasn't he a AAA manager in Pawtucket, I think, for a while, Lovullo?
Yes. And he's in like that kind of coaching tree. UCLA guy as a player, played in the big leagues a little bit. Maybe not like such a polarizing name, but these guys have to manage for a while so they can become polarizing names. We sit around and say, well, we don't have those great character managers. He's not old. He's not young. He got into it last night with JT Realmuto. He got into it big time last night with JT Realmuto. Corbin Carrol got drilled twice. He went out there right away. He got tossed, didn't like it. I'll just say quickly, I don't love JT Realmuto being in the mix, telling Torey Lovullo it's not a big deal that Corbin Carrol got drilled twice. If you can't pitch inside, don't pitch inside. A major league, like Kevin Gossman doesn't throw a curveball or a breaking ball because he doesn't have one. So, like, if you don't have an inside fastball, don't throw it. Torey Lovullo went to bat for his guy, got tossed. That's a point. I like Torey Lovullo getting tossed after Corbin Carrol got drilled the second time. Maybe next time, though, if Corbin Carrol gets drilled once, I just get fucking tossed. I just right away just run out there and fuck
You got to Corbin Carrol. I mean, he's not only is he the present, he's the future. You got to do whatever it takes to protect him.
Christian Walker's been pretty good this year. He's been okay in years before. I'm only mentioning this though because I want people to remember the name is Christian Walker is the guy that's why they got rid of. That's why they were comfortable trading Paul Goldschmidt because he put up back-to-back seasons with like a 950 OPS in AAA. So I like to see like Christian Walker's guy. People will not spend a lot of time on Christian Walker unless somebody from the Phoenix Mercury News wants to spend like a nice little puff piece, 1,500 words on a Sunday. But like if you're going to go out and hit 250 with an 800 OPS and you're not going to cost a lot of money and you're comfortable hitting seventh on a lineup and you're a decent guy, like you got a place on a championship baseball team.
Yeah, he'll hit 25 home runs for you. And by the way, to Lovullo too, by the way, I just want to say I like him a lot. I think he's a very good manager. He was there when we went to the playoffs last. He was also there when they lost 110 games. The fact that he can kind of do those two different things, he can be the manager for that shitty team that's young, and he can also be the manager for that competitive team. And he doesn't, I don't know, like he doesn't get in the way. When I watch games, I usually agree with his moves. I know that's kind of, I'm kind of just telling anecdotal evidence, but I don't know. I think he's a pretty solid guy. He's a pretty solid manager. He's pretty well respected in the game. I remember when he was in the minors, he was a guy that people kept saying should get a shot. This is his first shot. He's making the most of it. I don't know. I think he could do a lot worse than Torey Lovullo as your manager. I think he's a good hire.
Yeah, I think there's like big room in baseball to prove value with managers. I don't know how, and maybe not prove is the word, but there's still room for some sort of like accepted tangible value of what makes a good manager. I don't know what it is. But when I look at Torey Lovullo, I'm like, that's close. That I see that. And I've said the same stuff about Derek Shelton too, where I think guys are willing to play harder for them than what you get from a normal big leaguer. That's like, well, I'm in the big leagues. I show up to the show. We stay at the Ritz-Carlton. We hit it too. I get lunch here. Like,
right.
It creates a culture where guys are like, whatever, I'm in the fucking big league. So I think that is something that Torey Lovullo does. And again, Corbin Carrol gets drilled twice. You have to get kicked out. You have to be way more mad. If anything, I should criticize. He wasn't as mad as I would like to see.
I think you make a good point about like how do we analytically measure managers? There really isn't a great tool right now, or at least no one's smarter than me has been able to develop that. But I'm always a historical guy. So like look at 1967 with the Red Sox. They were a ninth place team. They bring in Dick Williams. They win the American League pennant, and he went in there and he changed the entire philosophy of the team. He was a drill sergeant manager. He was very, rules had to be followed. He was almost like a dictator. And by the late 80s, he's with the Mariners and no one listens to him anymore. The game had changed. So like that can happen too. And now we're in this new zone where it's even more of a player's manager than it was in the 80s. But Lovullo seems to be a guy that doesn't seem to piss anybody off. And I don't know. I think obviously he's been in the majors for a few years now, but I think he's like the perfect manager for a team like this. I don't know. But I would be very interested if someone very smart come up with an analytical tool to measure managers. I think you're absolutely right, Carl. I think there's with the fact that GMs have so much control now, how do we measure the modern manager? That's a great question.
Yeah, you're gonna have to chip us all. Like
What's that?
you're gonna have to microchip us all so you can like measure brain waves and like
Right.
you're gonna have to get inside the skull. But I'm interested in it. I like the manager aspect a lot. I just now then am gonna have the tendency to overrate it as I have with David Ross, at times. Um, I have a note here for third baseman with the Diamondbacks. That's interesting enough to say Evan Longoria's transition to DH since basically mid-May. He's got a 650 slug since with 6 homers and like
Wow.
30 RBIs in a DH role. It's been phenomenal in a DH role. And then they're platooning third base. Josh Rojas gets most of the action, has started 22 of their last 28 games. But I want to call out a player because we're going to talk about trades. They have a great trade they did. But there's a smaller trade. Emmanuel Rivera was a AAA third baseman and had a cup of coffee at the Kansas City Royals. They traded Luke Weaver in his 7.5 ERA to the Kansas City Royals last year on August 1st. Why? Why was Luke Weaver going to the Royals? Why was he like... Makes no sense to me at all. They get Emmanuel Rivera. He's a guy who can't play in AAA because he's too good. But like, do you have enough opportunities? 26-year-old guy with like a low career slug until he got to AAA. He's like stepped in so that Longoria can DH. And like they have objectively the least name recognition for any team at third base. I couldn't think of 3 more. Like, you got to be fucking kidding me. That's your third baseman. And they're getting decent enough production from the group. It seems like they're getting better with Evan Longoria. I just want to call that out because we're going to talk about Corbin, Carrol, talk about trades, how smart they are. But it's kind of funny that they're doing okay with that dumpster fire at third base.
Yeah, I think you're right about Rivera. You wonder when that's, his slash is 361, 391, 472. So, like, that's not going to keep up. Rojas cannot hit for power. So he's got some doubles, I guess, but that's concerning. His slug is 314. And you're absolutely right. Longoria is better suited to be a DH at this point in his career. He's a perfect clubhouse guy for this team. I think that was one of those free agent signings that went under the radar. What better mentor for Corbin Carrol than the original Corbin Carrol, Longoria, the guy that changed the franchise when he got called up and won Rookie of the Year. You couldn't pick a better spot. That's a great marriage. That was a great job there signing him in the offseason. Third base is an issue with this team, though, I think. I don't think Rivera is the long-term answer. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about a couple of different spots of this team. Right field's kind of a mess with Jake McCarthy. So they have some holes, and I just don't know. It's frustrating. I'm like, how do you fix it? And I don't know yet. I don't know what you do. I mean, they're winning without these guys, but I think that can't last.
Yeah, Jordan Lawler's their top prospect, one of the top prospects in baseball. He's too far away. He's in Double-A. You cannot rush him along you cannot compromise his progression for the season. And when you go down the list, the guys that are Major League ready are Triple-A in their prospect system. Their top position guys are in A-ball, rookie ball. They're years away. So it goes back to the trade deadline. But there's so many buyers and there's so few sellers. Right. So I really like that position. You take that. There's whatever buyer is willing to be a seller, like maybe the Brewers last year.
Yes. It sucks. And it sucks as a fan base if you're excited about your team and they literally punt the season away. It's a year of your life. I get it. You only get 80 years, right? So it's like, what the fuck are you doing here? But at the same token, you got to do what's best for the franchise. And if you can get a whole bunch of good players, good prospects, a bunch of them, and you're on the outside looking in anyway.
Diamondbacks proved this offseason. Great trades.
Yep.
Love their trades. No, I'm just teasing this up. We should have opened with this, but I knew I would spend 45 minutes on it because there's so much stuff you can take away from this trade. Dalton Varsho was a good player for him last year. I mean, he kind of emerged out of nowhere. And then I was surprised to see that he got traded to the Blue Jays. But you look at the Blue Jays roster, and so this offseason, the Arizona Diamondbacks traded Dalton Varsho to the Blue Jays for Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and Gabriel Moreno. Lourdes Gurriel Jr. is a Cuban outfielder, barrels his shit up out of the ball, had played with the Blue Jays for a number of years. Gabriel Moreno is a second best catching prospect in front of Frankie Alvarez, behind Adley Rutschman in the 2022 season. Very good catcher from Venezuela. The Diamondbacks traded Dalton Varsho which I think the general consensus was like, what the fuck, right?
I was shocked. This trade happened early in the offseason, and it was confusing to me. I will admit I didn't get it, and I'm wrong. This trade completely changed the D-backs, and it's because Gurriel, for some reason, I can't get in my stupid thick skull how good this guy is. I don't know what the block is for me. I don't know why I don't value this guy enough, and he's leveled up. Now he has the on-base percentage skill set. He's 29, and he's also increased his power. This guy is he's an all-star. And I need to accept that. We all need to accept that. If you're listening to that, respect this guy. He's providing balance that lineup with Carrol there. Gurriel has completely changed this team. So think about the Diamondbacks last year. People ask this, why are the Diamondbacks so much better this year? Which is a fair question. They had Gallon last year. They had Kelly. What the fuck? Well, the difference is you added Corbin Carrol, who's an MVP player. Full stop. He's an MVP player. And you add in Gurriel, who's an all-star. He's having an all-star season. That changes a team. And credit to the D-backs. That was a move that, we look at my Mets. Oh, they got Verlander. They got, Brandon Nimmo re-signed. Edwin Diaz re-signed. Edwin Diaz has been hurt all year. Verlander is basic bitch. And Gurriel is an all-star. This is why the offseason is so cool to look at, because you can see the moves that you don't necessarily notice are the biggest ones.
And now I want to know who initiated this trade. Was it the Blue Jays that looked at their lineup and said, listen, we're going to have Chapman, Springer, Bichette, Vlad, Merrifield, Kirk. I'm sure I'm missing another on there too.
They even added not offensive threat. They added Kiermaier after this trade. I know, but they must have had a plan, some blueprint somewhere. But you're right. Look at that lineup; it's pretty stacked. I mean, that's a great question, Carl. So if the Blue Jays initiated this, does that mean we all had a shot at Gurriel and we all fucking screwed the pooch, and the Diamondbacks were the ones smart enough to put a package together to get him? I love that question because I'm really interested what that answer would be. Maybe we'll find out in a few years.
But the key there is needing that left-handed bat, and they have the depth at catcher. Like Danny Jansen's probably the best backup catcher, and I shouldn't say that because maybe a backup catcher is having a great season right now.
The Braves have Darno and Murphy, but no, whatever. He's in the argument. I mean, we're splitting hairs. And
then Alejandro Kirk's just an elite offensive catcher. So to look at Moreno and say, I mean, you're really not going to have a spot to be an impact player for a number of years, or barring an injury or something. So we can get a good return for you now. If it was the Diamondbacks actively shopping Varsho because they knew Corbin Carrol was going to be that good, and they wanted to have an outfielder that could fill in a little bit and then get a player for Varsho, and maybe the argument with Varsho's value is he ran a little bit last year. I think he stole 16, 17 bases. So, okay, maybe he's a 30. What do those projections say? If someone was stealing 16 bases when Major League average last year is way, way lower.
Right.
So I'm just trying to talk through the value here, because if it's the Blue Jays, you didn't get enough. You just didn't. Like Dalton Varsho, I thought he was better until I researched for this show. Like I thought the peripherals would have been more stark. I thought he was more of a speed power threat guy. He's just a pretty good lefty bat, which they're all over the place.
Well, I think he was a little better than that last year. He was 25 last year. Has a 30. Has the 302 on base isn't great. The 443 slugging, but you can kind of see 27 home runs. You can see some of those things. So I think if you're the Blue Jays, I'll be fair to them for a second. You probably see those things at 25, and you're like, all right, the power in theory could keep going up. The on-base percentage, usually that goes up with age, right? Because they're running the zone more. So, all right, so some of those tools will keep increasing, and he'll become better and better. But it hasn't happened. You're absolutely right. If anything, he's regressed. I watched him. I went to the Mets Blue Jays game a couple weeks ago, and I was shocked at his stats, how poor they were. And I went home and looked closer, and it's like, no, this guy is having a kind of a disaster season. 293 on base, 395 slugging. He's definitely regressed. Now the speed's there, 9 steals, 32 runs, which is a pretty decent number, especially when you're considering he's not getting on base. But there is some issues with Dalton Varsho for sure, and you're absolutely right. It was a disaster trade for the Blue Jays. It's been a disaster, and it completely reframed the Diamondbacks.
Dalton Varsho is expected weighted on base and in those statistics that ignore the actual results and judge, whatever the StatCast says. Or I get lost when you start talking about expected weighted numbers, but
Yeah, me too.
they're all below average. They're all below average. And his average exit velocity is low. It was low last year. His hard hit rate's low. So it's surprising to see the Blue Jays give up Gabriel Moreno, who's such and looks great. I mean, you could argue he's a clear difference maker for the Diamondbacks, and people will go all season without saying, shouldn't say all season, but you can go a long time without hearing his name.
Yeah, I mean, look, Dalton Varsho is 26. Could he could he improve next year? Had a full year in the American League, kind of learns the pitchers, learns the stadiums, learns his teammates, learns his hitting coach. Could those things all happen? Sure, he could definitely bounce back. I'm not ready to say Dalton Varsho is done, but this trade, you got the Sean Murphy deal, right? And you got this trade. Those two trades are the biggest trades in the offseason, right? Like, there's nothing even. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I can't think of anything that even comes close as far as changing the landscape of the playoff teams right now. I mean, the Blue Jays are so competitive, but imagine if they had Gurriel and Moreno right now. Because, you figure Kirk's not having the same year he had last year either. I don't know. It's a fascinating trade. It's why I love baseball, because you can go back and look at this stuff. I love sports. I love going back and kind of reanalyzing some of these trades. It's fun to play armchair GM, especially when I was wrong. I thought, this is an interesting trade for both teams. I don't really get it. And then you look at what they're doing, you're like, oh, I get it. They were 9 steps ahead of me.
Imagine if they traded Gurriel and Moreno for some pitching.
Yeah, no shit, right? I mean, you figure they probably thought, we got Chris Bassett. We have the resources to get a guy like Chris Bassett, because it happened before they signed him. But they're probably like, all right, we got that box covered. We need to improve. We want to get Dalton Varsho. They must have seen something that they thought he could level up and become, ironically, the player that Gurriel is now.
I don't know if you've seen this. So Chris Bassett gets a shit pushed in by lefties this year. He's awful against lefties, dominant against righties, awful against lefties. This is the National League show, though. Don't make me suck Klemmer down a 2022 Mets pitching staff hypothetical here.
The Bassett thing, though, keep an eye on just peripherals, because he got off such a slow start. Just make sure that when we're looking at splits like with him, we're looking at maybe the more recent ones. He seems to have found his groove a little bit. But you're right, though. I mean, it's an issue. But he seems to have gotten a better handle on it. In April, it was kind of a disaster. It wasn't kind of. It was an absolute disaster.
I like the more we talk through them, they're only going to get better, and Corbin Carrol is this MVP candidate. He's a top player in the league. He's just unbelievably sensational to watch. He's got the look of a player where I feel old school. I feel nostalgia. I feel like I look at him and I can look 20 years ahead from now and just think of all of the great shit we've seen and talked about. It feels so comfortable watching him in a batter's box and watch him around a baseball field. I think maybe that's one of the cool, unique things about baseball too, is like, if you really had to pick out who is the best basketball player on the court, it's like, I would have an impossible time unless it was an isolation play, or who's the best football player on the field. Like, they all look utterly magnificent, but there's something about baseball where all these guys are big league professionals, sweet as fuck. And then like Corbin Carrol walks on the field and you're like, oh, did you see that guy? Look at the way his hair comes out, and he's got the 3/4 and everything looks so good and smooth.
No, it's 16th, the one-on-one.
16th overall out of a high school in Seattle, 16th overall, undersized kid, just balls on that scouting department. I don't care how good he was at the area code games. It just takes balls to take somebody from that type of climate like that.
No, it's the one-on-one aspect of baseball. Like, I remember I went to Montreal in 2001, 2002, and saw Barry Bonds take batting practice. And the ball went off his bat differently. I've never heard it like that before or since. It was like a thunderclap. And it was like, oh, this is different. And that's the cool thing about baseball, is you have those one-on-one matchups where you can kind of individualize, understand why, or see a guy where football and basketball and hockey are always so many moving parts. Other than quarterback, there's no isolation really. So it's hard to, maybe like a Lawrence Taylor or Ray Lewis, you can see them break out. But it's a lot easier in baseball. And that's probably a big reason why I love it. The individual stats, you can see the talent right there.
We're getting a little deep, and I like it.
We are, yeah. We're one team in. We're 50 minutes in. So this is a marathon episode of the National League show, apparently.
We can be quicker. We can be quicker. I just know the Diamondbacks are hot right now. We need it. We need it. Like, this is what the baseball world needs, because having done this show last year, the amount of times it's like Mets, Braves.
Yeah.
See the Mets, Braves, Dodgers. Good for Corbin, Carrol. Now there's two other teams on the list. If we could spend 10, 15 each, or just 10. We had talked last week heavily about the Reds with Ellie De La Cruz's debut. That was more player profile. We had introduced Matt McClain and kind of Spencer Steer and some of the stuff they were doing. So you had texted me this week and you were like, we have to talk about the Reds. Because when I was saying NL Central, I erroneously had brought up the Cardinals as an interesting talking point. And you were like, oh no, my friend. The Cincinnati Reds can win this division.
Yeah, they absolutely can. And the reason isn't because the Reds are so great, which they are doing some exciting stuff. It's the National League Central is just so shitty. The Brewers proved that this week, losing, 3 games to the A's, excuse me. The Cardinals are in, reverse. And then you have the Pirates, who I don't really believe. Although, with each passing week, you never know. But the Reds is fascinating because, like you said, McClain, right? This is a guy, shortstop. He's 23. He's hitting 330. He's slugging over 500. Only 115 bats. That's still interesting. Ellie De La Cruz, this guy is incredible. So this is what I'm really excited about this baseball season. And I hope people are. I feel some of that excitement because I can't remember a time when younger players had more of an impact on playoff teams or teams that could be playoff teams, just a wild impact on competitiveness as we have right now. Because you look at some of the best teams and some of these teams that are like rising, like the Diamondbacks with Corbin, Carrol, the Reds with De La Cruz, and it's because of the young. When I say young, I mean young players are pushing them up. That to me is so exciting and so fun. The Rangers' success is a little different, although they have Josh Jung, who is a young guy. It's a beast for them too. So having some of these young players carry these teams that were kind of doormats for a while into like playoff contention to me is so exciting. And I think Ellie De La Cruz might be. Corbin Carroll is the best player, but De La Cruz might be the most exciting. I don't know. You put on the Reds have been so boring for so long. You put on a Reds game now and you see this guy, it is thrilling. This guy is very exciting.
Yeah, there's two different types of appreciation I can have for a young baseball player. Probably more, I suppose, but you bring up Corbin Carroll and Ellie De La Cruz. I don't feel lucky that Corbin Carroll is a baseball player. He was born a baseball player. He came out of the womb to play baseball. Like that, he ain't doing anything. Maybe play a little hockey, across the border to Vancouver. If you got family up there, whatever that scene's like. Ellie De La Cruz looks like he just do anything he wants. Any sport, any position, anything at all. And so the fact that at 6'5", switch hit, he wants to play shortstop. I feel lucky. I'm like, ooh. Thank you. I feel as a college sports fan, as a University of Illinois fan, it's almost that same feeling of seeing like the 5-star commit to your school. Like, dude, he's playing for us. He's not going to Michigan or Ohio State. That never happens for Illinois. But like, yeah, he could be in the NFL. He could be in the NBA.
That's a great point. Like about just guys. Some guys are just more exciting than others, and that's not a knock. So like in the 80s, I grew up, and like you had guys like Wade Boggs and Tony Gwynn who were interesting in their own way, contact, or Don Mattingly, but they were guys that went to work every day. And you're right, they were baseball players, right? And then in 1989, Ken Griffey Jr. debuts. And it was the first electric player I can remember. I was 9, and I was like, holy, this is different, right? And you kind of feel that way with Ellie De La Cruz. Like, this is different. You're right. He's like the 6'5" guy playing infield. He can do anything. You feel like he had like the limits. With Corbin Carroll, like, all right, this guy, this is going to sound crazy, but the ceiling is probably like a Stan Musial or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that, there's a ceiling there. You can kind of see it. And we've kind of done it already. Like whatever Corbin Carroll is going to do, which is awesome, exciting. And if I'm a Diamondbacks fan, I have 9 Corbin Carroll jerseys. But we've kind of already seen it in some form or fashion. Ellie De La Cruz, he's going to do stuff on a monthly basis that we've never seen before. And that's fun. That's exciting. It's wild.
Well said, Klemmer. I'm trying to think if there's any other type of player in the last 15 years. One that comes to mind for a couple of comparisons we've talked about, but on a much smaller level is the Joe Mauer. He was a first-team he was committed to Florida State to play football and baseball, and he was an parade All-American basketball player or whatever it was, and he hits 360 as a catcher and could you imagine this guy playing quarterback? But I don't like some. Hey, fuck you, Colin.
Colin's very excited. Colin's going to the game with us. He's very excited.
Yes, for those of you listening, our producer Colin Cooper is making his first appearance on YouTube of the season. Subscribe to us on YouTube.
I think like O'Neal Cruz. I know that he's not the greatest player right now, but he's an exciting player to watch. When you go to the ballpark and you watch the Pirates play, at least before this season, especially, your eyes were just drawn to him. I think of like Pedro Martinez, a pitcher with, when he's the Red Sox. You went to the ballpark and you never knew what was going to happen next. And I feel that way when I watch Elly De La Cruz play. When I put on the Reds, my extra innings package, put on their old TV and I'm watching it. And I don't know what he's going to do next. I can't wait to go to a Reds game. Like I can't wait till he's in New York. I'm really excited to see him play for sure.
A feeling I can compare that to watching Elly De La Cruz play, and it's on such a smaller level, but my brain is just searching for a comparison here. Where like, oh, now that I've seen him in the box and run and throw and make plays, Rafael Furcal, because when he came up to the Braves, and he was such an explosive power, speed, and then he went out in the field. He was a dominant shortstop. Like he played. Is it possible to say that he played a powerful shortstop? When he got the fucking slow roller, he went in there, was 100 across the time, and it almost like a sense where he was putting on a show with so much of his tools. And even then, it's on a such smaller scale with Elly De La Cruz. And I'm thinking of shortstops that put on a show with tools. Like A-Rod, whatever. A-Rod was a robot, a machine that was polished and all that shit. I'm talking about like that raw, powerful, like, fuck, man, this guy's got horsepower.
It's tough with infielders. I think of another Brave like Andrew Jones. But he's an outfielder. But like he had that same electric. Like, what's this guy going to do next? I don't know. With infielders, you're right. It is different because even like Carrol Jr., right? Like he was a machine. He went there every, and like he just would show up every day and he'd hit a double, he'd hit a home run, he'd beat you. But he wasn't like thrilling to watch like De La Cruz is. You're right. It is. And maybe that's where we are now. Like these infielders, baseball is so athletic now. Even these infielders are doing insane, exciting things that you, maybe like Ozzie Smith from a defensive point of view, he was exciting to watch. I never saw him in person, but I did, watch him on TV and stuff. But yeah, you're right. But even this is a different field than Ozzie Smith because De La Cruz can do anything.
Yeah, if like they were guitar players, Ozzie Smith would be just like, would be more like, I guess, Jimi Hendrix, or maybe like a lighter, just something like crazy and graceful and beautiful and like never seen it before, never going to see it again. Elly De La Cruz, I'm sorry, he like plays the field like a heavy metal band. He's just out there. It's just overwhelming. It's all encompassing of my senses with Elly De La Cruz. And even so, Matt McClain is like day to day a better player. Like Matt McClain right now at day to day, I sound like a Reds fan. Matt McClain has won over the city of Cincinnati in 26 games. And someone told me this, a Cincinnati Reds fan, I will not name him. He works for Barstool Sports. He said, Joe Burrow could throw 5 touchdowns every single Sunday and do whatever he wants with the Bengals. Matt McClain could hit a walk-off on a Thursday night, and Cincinnati will love him so much more. Like they want it out of the Reds so much more. And Matt McClain apparently is that guy.
He's very good. I mean, De La Cruz only played 7 games, so it's hard for me to kind of, De La Cruz. I mean, McClain's great. I mean, he's been great. And then you also have the pitching. They call up Andrew Abbott, who, gets called up and he's pitched 11 2/3 innings, hasn't given up a run yet. Only 2 starts, I know, but like when you add basically like someone who has ace potential or is pitching like an ace, at least early on, and then you add McClain during the season, and you add Elly De La Cruz, and even the guy that got the save last night. I don't know if he has an incredibly bright future or not. Ricky Karcher, his minor league stats aren't particularly great, but he got his first save last night in his first appearance. So it was like everything is coming up Reds. Rico Bosco got the Reds at 17-1 when they called up De La Cruz, and they're only 3.5 back, and they are adding pieces. This isn't the same Reds that were boring and dreadful to watch up until a month ago. As much as I love Joey Votto, like Joey Votto is not fun to watch. He's not exciting. This is a different, exciting Reds team that we haven't seen in a while. I mean, the last time the Reds were legitimately great, I was 10 years old, 1990 World Series. I know they 95, they went to the LCS, and then they had that little spurt after that. But the Reds haven't been awesome in a long time. And imagine if they make the playoffs, even if they lose in the first round. Can you imagine if those young guys get playoff experience? They have a year where they're successful. Imagine like you talk about the fans in Cincinnati have something to root on. These young guys, that's a lot of fun. Even if they go 83-79, they make the playoffs, they get swept. 2 games, they're gone. It's still cool. It's still exciting. If you're a Reds fan, we made the playoffs. What about next year? Let's go.
I hope they can.
Me too.
Because the Cardinals don't. This is an aberration of a season for the Cardinals, and not to be a biased Cubs fan, but they're going to continue to spend money and invest in the team. Like, so whether or not they end up being at the top of the National League, they're not going to be a dorm. They're going to continue to build and invest in the team. There's some really good players come with them. So the Reds do have this window where, like, fuck that. Let's just get in front. They can take that division over for a window. If these guys are as good, if Nick Lodolo takes steps, Graham Ashcraft's been very bad, very, very bad. But like Hunter Green's a stud. They got, like you bring up Andrew Abbott. They have opportunities there like to jump ahead where a year ago, no way. 3 months ago, no way I would have said this.
I'll say this about the Reds. They should not be buyers. So we talk about with Diamondbacks, they should be buyers. The Reds should just stay neutral. This is a team that could fall apart in a second. They have no depth. Ashcraft is awful and he's hurt. Luke Weaver, we talked about him earlier. He's on their staff. He's terrible. Lodolo's hurt. He has potential, but he's hurt. The Reds, look, the Reds are not a good baseball team. They're taking advantage of a weak division, and they have a lot of young, exciting players. But they really should hold steady, let the guys that have play, and then maybe, hopefully, use some resources. I think Votto's contract's over at the end of the year. Use some of those resources to fill in some of those gaps for next year. But I would be, if I'm a Reds fan, I hope the Reds fans have the wherewithal to be like, all right, we shouldn't give any prospects away. We need to grow this team.
Joey Votto next year will be 40 years old. He has a team option with a $7 million buyout. The team option's for $20 million, which is probably around 18 to 20% of the Reds' payroll.
Yeah, so the buyout's automatic. I mean, he hasn't even had an at-bat yet this year. So they'll buy him out for 7, and then hopefully they can use that 13 and spend it on some players that will contribute next year.
But now, why does the Cincinnati Enquirer ask right now, could Joey Votto be back in Cincinnati Reds lineup next week?
Well, maybe he'll. Hopefully, he comes back. Imagine the boost that would be if he can. Now he hasn't been good in a couple of years, but imagine if he can come back and be productive. There's no way to pick up that option, though. I mean, you can't rely on this guy for $20 million. No, they'll buy him out.
They're paying everybody else $750,000. Everybody they're going to rely on. I think there's if they go to the playoffs this year. Okay, let me just say this. Joey Votto the other night. You know what? I don't think so, but let me just fucking throw. Let me throw some shit at the wall and see what sticks with you. And by the way, I respect everything you're about to say. You could shut this down as much as possible, but I at least want to serve you up something decent to shut down. Like, I'm not just going to say, like, yeah, fuck it, send Votto home. Let me just hear me out on this. What if at 40 years old, they're coming off this playoff appearance like you talk about. He comes back. He just went 1 for 3 in a AAA rehab assignment. He comes back. Then they really got going. They don't have him play the field. They have him DH. Take him slow. Like he hasn't been in a lineup with Spencer Steer. He hasn't been in a lineup with McLean.
I mean, the guy hit 205 last year, Carl. Like,
fuck.
What are we doing? I mean, like,
he was hurt? He was hurt.
All right, well, he's hurt all the time. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I love Joey Votto. Joey Votto, I hope makes the Hall of Fame. I think he will. But you can't give $20 million to a guy that played 91 games last year. He missed half the season this year or whatever. Missed 70. I mean, you need, this team deserves guys that will be on the field. Now, maybe you buy him out and maybe you can bring him back on another deal or something. I don't know how much Joey Votto wants to come back next year. I don't know. That's the thing too, is he might not want to stick around. But you cannot give him $20 million. You have to.
Okay, so I tried and failed miserably, and I would like to apologize to Reds fans and baseball fans that are more knowledgeable of the Reds payroll situation because, I mean, Kevin Newman's making $2.6 this year. That's the highest salary they have on the books of anybody on the active player right now. Luke Weaver, $2 million, is their third highest paid player on the roster. And I'm not saying that as a reason to keep Votto that they'll have money for him next year. Like if you're not Donovan Solano last year, $4.5 million. I'm just gonna keep going down here. 2020. No, fuck that season.
Now, Moustakas, the Reds had like some weird cuts last year. I just don't know what their books look like next year. I think they could be in a position to really be able to do some things. I don't know. I think Moustakas comes off the books this year too, and he was making a decent amount of money. They might be able to go and get some guys this offseason, which is I think would be so exciting. Yeah, they're paying Moustakas $18 million this year to not play for them. So you have Devado $13 million. You have the Moustakas $18 million. That's $31 million right there, and that's keeping the payroll neutral. So imagine if they could provide some resources on this team, and then you have guys like maybe Godolo and Ashcraft who can get a little better. You have in a weak division, you have a chance to put something together. The Reds ownership needs to step up and spend even more than that $30 million. They need to go out and do like the Rangers did this year and provide some real resources to that team. Because if you did that, you could put a little juggernaut together.
They're committed to $37 million next season.
Yeah, come on, guys. Let's go. Spend some money. You have some great pieces. Let's go. The Reds fans deserve at least, this is so stupid, $100 million. They deserve, every Major League Baseball payroll should be much higher than they claim. They all cry poor. Get out of here. Spend $70, $80, $90 million next offseason. Let's go. Let's get some guys. And when I don't mean $90 million, total. That's 1 year. I want to see 3 or 4 guys making $20, $10, $15 million on this team next year.
I'm interested if anybody from a Reds Nation listens or that fan base, I'm interested in perception of the owner. Because Castellini or however, I rate him, I don't say him. But Bob, call him Bob, born in Cincinnati, buys the Reds in 06, 05, 06, takes them to, their first playoff, whatever, since Sean Casey flirted with it. But then last year they started season 3-22, and there were public calls for him to sell the team.
Yeah, he's a piece of shit. Wasn't he kind of like half threatening to trade or sell the team and like move the team? He's like, well, if it doesn't work here, like fuck him.
Okay, I don't know. Yeah, I would assume that you hate most owners.
Yeah, I do hate most owners. That's absolutely right because they all pretend they're poor and they're not. But he seems especially douchey. I'm out on this guy. This guy stinks. But hopefully he can come to his senses, see some real potential with this team, and they can go and get because the Reds deserve. But I said the only thing is I do not want to see them trade any prospects this year. I want to just toe the line, go with the guys you got. If it's good enough to get there, you get there. You're not going to last long in the playoffs anyway. But at least if you get there, it's exciting. If not, competitive. And then next offseason, let's go.
Yeah, I think the Reds will hang on to their prospects because they're probably sitting around their conference room right now being like, man, we're winning games and these guys are on league minimum deals. Look at that. Look, these rookies win baseball games. We haven't seen this in 30 years. It's like, yeah, you can win games with young guys if they're good. So
yeah, and also provide some resources to go around them.
We have some time for the Marlins, don't we?
I don't know. I just got called in 3 different shows, so I don't know.
All right. Here's what we're going to do with the Marlins. Here's what we're going to do.
We do the Marlins next week and do a deep dive? Because I want to talk Yuri Perez. I want to talk that pitching staff. I have some thoughts on Edward Cabrera. I think the Marlins, we could do a deep dive with the Marlins like we do the D-backs, I think pretty easily.
Okay, what I would like to do with the Marlins next week is I want to talk about trade history with the Marlins over the last 15 years.
Ooh, okay.
So since they decide when they did the HBO documentary and they had Burley and Reyes and Isaac Ian and all that stuff.
That was 2011, 2012.
Yep.
Okay. Like when they became the Miami Marlins, that thing?
And then in June was like, this isn't going to work. And then for like the next 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, the Miami Marlins have been involved in some of the biggest trades in Major League Baseball. Some of the best players have worn their minor league uniforms and passed through their system.
Okay, I love it. Let's do that next week. I think it's a great idea. And also talk about their current roster too. That's a show there.
And you know what? We tried with the outline today. We tried to get in and out of different topics, but heaven forbid you and I get a little bit too detailed about Johnny Sane and Warren Spahn or, Torey Lovolo's character and the Diamondbacks pitching prospects. It is what it is, guys. This is Barstool Baseball. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. Go follow Chris Klemmer. Go follow him on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Yeah, Snap?
No, I have a TikTok and the Instagram, and it's Klemmer with 7 M's. I make it easy for people.
All right. Enjoy the Subway Series. Thank you very much. This is Barstool Baseball. Go subscribe to our stuff. I'll be in Omaha next time you guys hear us. Until next time, tune in or see you next time. Or fuck it. Love you guys. Bye.